There's a cynical saying here. It's not much of a war, but it's the only one we've got. The enemy, if that's what he is, hides it. The innocent peasant, if that's what he is, ignores it. And the soldier, the grunt, counts the days and goes out looking for it.
Hold it.
He is called Grunt. He is a combat soldier, the Marine in a line company. He is about 21 years old. He was drafted, or he enlisted for one term. His war is a small patch of jungle spattered with 3 of his friends. He has killed a man. His name is Sergeant Bob Corbett of Kilkenny, Minnesota. Lieutenant Jim Peterson of Minneapolis. PFC John Steele of St. Cloud. Sergeant Richard Hinkemeyer of St. Paul. Lieutenant Ross Peterson of Minneapolis. Captain Jerry Klukas of St. Paul. Lance Corporal Scott Matson of Minneapolis. And PFC Harold Keelan of Dundas. Other men whose voices will be heard will not be identified because they risk military reprisal for what they have to say about their war. It is October.
Well, why not be honest about this, you know? I mean, it's always easy to rally people back in the world that aren't fighting the war. You know, say we're fighting for democracy and we're fighting so these people can be free and all this. Well, I don't think these were really our motives to start with, and I think a lot of other people have this feeling too, that maybe our interests are more selfish. Well, why not be just a little honest about it, you know, that we're not fighting for these villages out here? Because I get it all the time, you know, when a civilian's killed, well, it don't matter, kill all the gooks, you know? I mean, that's no good.
This is where the war begins for Sergeant Bob Corbett, the 25th Division's Firebase Jackson, a dismal blob of sandbags and barbed wire. Each bunker here has rats in it at night, but man and rat manage a peaceful coexistence. Man too exhausted to wake up when rat crawls over him, rat too stuffed with garbage to bite man. Today, the men have been told that cans of pop will no longer be brought to the firebase. The battalion commanders found empty cans lying around. But there are always Vietnamese women at the battalion garbage dump who will sell the men anything they want, from a bag of marijuana to unsanitary sex. The going price for both is $5. It is agreed that the marijuana is much the safer of the two. Charlie Company calls Corbett the new guy. This morning, he goes on his first patrol. Grunts are cool toward new guys and watch them suspiciously for any sign of incompetence that could get someone killed. This is especially true in Corbett's case because he'll be a squad leader. Charlie Company is hurting for squad leaders. So many have stepped on booby traps lately. Corbett's baptism begins. A one-day patrol into the rice paddies. 4 feet of black water covers the paddies, and beneath that, bottomless mud. It swallows a foot and sucks on it. After an hour, exhaustion drives everything from the mind except the effort of the next step. If there was racism to begin with, that too disappears out here. The water is alive with green-black leeches, sometimes half a foot long, that slither under the fatigues or siphon blood right through them.
Oh, damn, he's sucking from both ends.
The patrol is met halfway by 2 boys selling Pepsi for 50 cents a can, proving that the Vietnamese are getting the hang of capitalism and that the patrol lacks the element of surprise. Soldiers become wary when the boys fail to appear. That could mean an ambush is waiting for them. The line of men struggling across the open paddies would seem to be very vulnerable to ambush or snipers. At one time, patrols like this were used as decoys to draw enemy fire. That tactic has supposedly been scrapped. Theoretically, the value in these missions is to make the American presence felt by the rice farmers and the Viet Cong, who, in some cases, are interchangeable. But the farmers go on about their business as though there were no war, turning their backs to the Americans.
I've never seen a farmer working out in a field or anything if one had happened to be around. If a GI got wounded or something, I don't believe I've ever seen any of the farmers come and help a wounded GI.
They hit the dirt, man.
That's right.
They had to start crawling.
We were in contact
The opposite direction.
We were in contact by this patrol base once, and there were some civilians around there, and one of our men got wounded and one was killed there. And there were farmers around there, and they never come over there to try to help us with the wounded or anything. They just stood back and watched.
A man is questioned. According to the rules, he is not a Viet Cong if he can produce an ID card.
No sweat. Take a pop, son. Yeah. No sweat.
There is sporadic firing ahead. Lieutenant Tom Davis is unable to learn whether it's VC or a friendly ARVN force maneuvering up there. Either way, it would be foolhardy to work forward for a closer look, and so the patrol is cut short. Each grunt has a story to tell about occasions when the ARVN have opened fire on Americans, by mistake or just for the hell of it. A scout for the Americans who used to be a Viet Cong says ARVN same VC. Americans leave, all ARVN chew hoy, meaning they would defect to the other side. Firebase San, about 30 miles north of Saigon, known as the first fully immersible fire base because of its proclivity for disappearing whenever it rains, which is every night. This is the home of the 1st Battalion, 28th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division, B Company. This fire base is part of an experiment in Vietnamization called Dong Tien, or Progress Together. The Americans and a Vietnamese company use the same helicopters, the same artillery, go on the same missions.
My platoon was assigned to the ARVN company on not this last operation, the one before. We worked with their company, and they were quite well in the field. We sort of we're Americans and they're Vietnamese, and we sort of work things a little bit different than they do, but other than that, we work fairly well together.
But Lieutenant Peterson joined a loud, unanimous sigh of relief when he heard the ARVN would not be going along on the 4-day combat mission the following morning. Sweeney, the battalion commander, watches overhead from his helicopter. He carries a swagger stick and is renowned for grading his companies on the size of their enemy body counts.
People that really do want, let's go get them, that kind of attitude. Those are the people that are like, well, your brass, they can stay behind a desk and look at their map and say, well, there's buku gooks out here, well, let's go get them, Yeah. So they send people out as they fly way over above it in the chap,
This is virgin territory, thought to be ripe with Viet Cong. Captain Parker says if the landing zone is hot, gain fire superiority, kick hell out of them.
I get to thinking a lot of times when I'm out in the field, I'm carrying a rifle. I never carried a rifle before to kill anything. Here I am looking for a human being to kill.
PFC John Steele of St. Cloud wants to be a biology teacher. At the moment, he's an assistant machine gunner.
Like everybody else, I want to go home. I want to see the snow. And nobody likes it out in the boonies, and your morale goes down a lot after you're out here. Probably the most miserable part for me is when say we're humping. This is a term we use for walking. Say we've got a long way to walk and it's hot. And a lot of times when you first go out on a mission, you've got 6 meals of sea rations you have to carry along with all your other gear, your weapons and your ammo. And it really gets you down. You just want to throw everything down and say, the hell with it. But once you sit down and you can get a cool drink of water and maybe eat a can of fruit, smoke a cigarette, then things don't look quite so bad after that.
The majority of the time, that's all you, when you're not occupied by something else, you're always back in the States. You're always thinking about what you're going to do when you get back, how you're going to, you know, like what I think about a lot is when I get a new car when I get back and setting up my room with my new stereo set, and going back to school and just dreaming about how you're going to set things up when you get back and how nice it'll be to have the comforts of the States again after having to go through some of the bad miseries of being out here.
Up ahead, the company has stumbled into a complex of enemy bunkers.
It says mines and booby traps, death to Americans, things on that line.
Someone had been here earlier this morning, probably scared off by the artillery or the helicopters. There are 4 deep bunkers. The ceiling of one is lined with corrugated steel stamped Schmidt beer. Whoever had been here was preparing to eat lunch, foul-smelling fish and vegetables. There's a stench of long accumulated sweat. A tire scrap was left behind. 2 oblong hunks cut from it to make Ho Chi Minh sandals.
Okay, Jim?
A bat flies out of one of the bunkers into the face of a man from the 3rd platoon.
Alpha, Vapors, Alpha, Shed 66 Juliet.
The bat most likely carries rabies, and a helicopter is called in to evacuate the man. Captain Parker finds a Chinese communist mine. The helicopter had just missed it. The men pay Parker the ultimate tribute. They say he doesn't act like an officer. He's always looking out for you. Anytime there's a dirty job, he does it himself. B Company snakes into the jungle again in search of the Viet Cong. The 3 platoons weave around each other to spoil ambushes. With their peace medals, their grins when they fumble for cigarettes and find them all soggy with sweat, their protective attitude toward each other, these men make reluctant-looking warriors. Steele says he hopes he never sees a VC. Hinkemeyer tossed a grenade over a log once and found a mangled body there. The memory of that bothers him. There is no sign of the enemy. For 4 days, B Company will have no chance to dry out. Steele and Hinkemeyer's feet are already splotched with ringworm. At night, boots must be left on, and shirts buttoned up against the mosquitoes, red ants, and the half-dozen spiders that will creep into bed with the men. Captain Parker thinks the VC will return during the night. Half the men stay awake to watch. The 1st platoon spots flashlights back near the VC bunkers.
Direction 4, 600, give me a right 100, drop 200.
The rain begins at sundown and will pour steadily for 5 hours. The grunt shrinks into a fetal position to escape it, but the water washes under him and drips through the ponchos until he has to grit his teeth to keep from screaming. But no noise is permitted at night. No cigarettes. There's only the sound of the rain, the swash of ponchos, and the muffled clink of canteens being opened to catch the rainwater. "30 miles away, an overweight major stationed in Saigon buys his Vietnamese girlfriend another drink and says, 'Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die.' They both laugh. It's a different sort of war here. At dawn, B Company shivers awake, mutters a word or two about poor accommodations, and steals back toward the enemy bunkers. Again, nothing. At the edge of a clearing, protective artillery is called in. On the fourth day, B Company again returns to the bunkers. The 3rd platoon sees one enemy soldier walking toward them, and they kill him. The mission is over.
Does all this make any sense to you? I mean, what does all your misery add up to?
I think everybody has grown up a lot since they come to the field. I can notice, I haven't been in the field that long, but the new guys that come in, you can see that after 1 or 2 missions, a lot of them mature quite a bit. Be surprised what you take for granted. Back in the States, over here, you haven't slept in a bed for 3 months. You don't even know what a hot meal is. And you'll appreciate it a lot more when you get back to the States, I think. It's a bad experience, but in a way, it's probably, I figure everybody learned something from it.
I'll say a thing that's gotten the morale up for the guys over here that I think, well, it helps their morale out a lot when they're in the field is they've got this new R&R center down in Zion where you get a 3-day stand down every couple of months. And it's real nice. They've got a swimming pool and a place for the guys to drink.
This is Stand Down, a celebration. B Company's first day out of the field in 2 months. Their first meal in 5 days. The first real shower or clean clothes in 60 days. The last stand down was a reward for having the highest body count in the division.
It doesn't mean whose body count, as long as you get a body count, you know. I mean, that's the main deal.
How about the civilian we killed over at Shamrock? The count was counted on the body count. Davison.
Once we wouldn't even get to go in on stand down because we didn't have a big enough body count.
Yeah,
that was pretty ridiculous.
After those body counts, a lot of baloney anyway.
They said, how can we ask for a stand down when the other company?
When we haven't killed anyone. Yeah. We haven't killed anyone, you know.
This is Ku Chi, the 25th Medical Battalion Hospital. A Medevac helicopter crew starts on a dust-off, the war's equivalent of an ambulance run.
You take your regular GIs, you know, the 2-year men. They're the people who are fighting this war. It's not a war for your lifers, you know. It's a war for the 2-year men. The lifers are the guys that are sitting back. I mean, some of your COs and stuff, they're out there humping with you part of the time anyhow. But you take your 2-year men as the majority. They're the people who are getting burnt over here. The people who are getting killed, people who are going home without legs, without arms, stuff like this.
The helicopter reaches the wounded man in about 5 minutes. The man has stepped on a landmine. Both legs are mangled. His company commander was hit in the face by shrapnel. It's October 15th, Moratorium Day.
People during World War II, they had a cause. They had something to fight for. Here, they don't have nothing to fight for.
Well, out here, we don't need signs and wonders. We have a reminder every day of the closeness of God. We have a reminder every day that we have an obligation of service to Almighty God. When you stand so close God as we do out here, it would be more difficult to forget than to remember.
This is Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, 3rd Marine Division.
Bring us healing from heaven.
PFC Harold Keelan of Dundas carries a poem in his wallet, written by a Marine who was killed on a nearby hill. The poem begins, "Take a man, put him alone, 10,000 miles from home, empty his heart of all his love, make him live in sweat and blood." Lance Corporal Scott Matson's prized possession is a picture of his girlfriend, Kathy. Matson was the Minneapolis High School diving champion a year and a half ago. The company commander, Captain Jerry Klukas, quit his job as a lawyer in St. Paul and became a Marine because he had always wanted to be a Marine. Lieutenant Ross Peterson of Minneapolis, the 3rd platoon leader.
Okay, Cook, let's get them up and get them going.
Echo Company is in the middle of a 10-day patrol headed for Hill 461 Sierra, where Lima Company was massacred 5 months ago. After that happened, weeks of B-52 bombings known as arc lights turned this national forest preserve into a graveyard of tree skeletons. Captain Klukas says every man in his company has dysentery from exhaustion and a poor diet. Every man has jungle rot and ringworm. Many have malaria. Their arms are sliced by the sharp elephant grass. A man named T.J. Calhoun stands there and shakes from too many days walking point. Lieutenant Peterson finds it hard to believe that the mountains are deserted. There's no shooting. He was wounded on this same ridge 5 months ago. That was the day 50 men in his company were killed. Cans of sea rations, rockets that didn't explode, Ho Chi Minh sandals, a downed helicopter, and other leavings of dead men from both sides litter the slopes. Matson says the men feel pretty good today. They have sea rations. Last week, the weather was bad and the supply choppers didn't come. For 2 days, there was no food. Matson remembers one time Echo Company went past the garbage dump of the 101st Airborne Division. The 101st had had pancakes and eggs for breakfast. Their leftovers were in the garbage cans. We had a feast on that, he says. The men have heard that the division's commanding general has a private chef. Someone says generals probably get hungrier than privates. Lieutenant Peterson's platoon has found something.
They even had a 60, an 81 mortar, one of ours. It's got a hole in it now, evidently from the bombing. Let's get the bypass. Just a quick spot on what we got over here. Evidently the Gooners were picking up and using some of our gear. 81 rounds. We found some more RPG rounds, a couple of satchel charges.
Most of the mortars used to belong to the ill-fated Lima Company. There is one North Vietnamese corpse.
Okay, why don't you get a count of everything as it comes up here?
Lieutenant, why'd they leave?
We had heavy arc lights in here about, they started on the 20th of September, and they pounded this whole area up here. And they had just started a bunker complex on the backside of this hill. It was what we think was the 9th NVA Regiment, part of the 308th Steel Division, one of General Giap's personal divisions.
Where'd they go?
Hopefully back north across the Z.
For good?
I'd almost hate to bet my life on.
What are you fighting for?
I think for the little kids over here. Ever since I come over here, it's been always the little kids that have, been suffering the most since I've seen over here. And they're kind of groovy little kids, really. They don't seem to want this war. They don't seem to want us to go.
All those people want is their land and a bowl of rice. And they'll get it. That's all.
No matter what rule in them.
No, well, they'll get it whether they're under communism or under
they don't
on top of democracy. All they want is a bowl of rice and food and that water buffalo, man, and that's all they got.
Like, when you're out there in a firefight, you aren't thinking, wow, this is for love of country. Well, sure, I mean, you can't get down against, everybody feels highly of the United States. If you didn't, you wouldn't want to go back. But as far as fighting for a cause, can you think of any reasons why these people are killed other than just self-pride, and pride and, lack of, or that they just don't want to disgrace their families? That's the only reason. It just doesn't make any sense,
This was October. Young men being sent out in search of a war. Jungles that once offered plenty of opportunities for a boy to kill or to die now containing empty bunkers, footprints going the other way, and frustration for the ambitious commander wanting a big body count. More to the point, some empty hospital beds and some doctors standing around with nothing to do. And the grunt marks off another month on his calendar and hopes the quiet is not an illusion. These are some of the things we learned about the composite grunt. He is fighting to save his life, for his pride, for the Vietnamese children, and against the specter of communism. He sometimes thinks we are winning, but he can't explain what we will have won. He is lonely and he is angry. He will come home much older, skinnier, sadder, and with a set of words will spill out automatically and embarrass him. He has smoked marijuana but prefers beer. He thinks the Vietnamese army should take over the fighting, and he thinks when they do, they will fail. And what's more, he doesn't particularly care. In the words of one soldier who had survived his year in Vietnam, I'm going to go home, I'm going to sit down where it's cool, and I'm going to forget the whole thing.
Yeah, shave sideburns, man. Keep that mustache trimmed. Well, you know, I mean, it makes a hell of a lot of difference, you know, if your sideburns are trimmed over here.
Don't it make you wanna go home now? Don't it make you wanna go home? All God's children get weary when they roam. Don't it make you wanna go home? Don't it make you wanna go home?